this isn't a geriatric sweatshop, right?
Was it actually a geriatric sweatshop? No. But do I personally think it could have ended up turning into that? Yeah, I do, honestly. Welcome back to the Max Reality. If you've seen my face before, then you know the drill. But if you're new here, I love talking all things reality TV, especially when it comes to one of my all-time favorite shows, Shark Tank. And today, we are talking about a pitch that is an all-time wild one in my book. Not for what happened while they were pitching in the tank, but more what happened in their time after. And that is Sarah Oliver Handbags. If you've never heard of Sarah Oliver Handbags before, that is okay. I can give you the short and sweet before we get into it. The whole idea is that they sell hand-knit purses that are made by elderly people in retirement communities. Seems cute, seems like a nice, wholesome business. That is, until you look a little further into it, which is exactly what the federal government decided to do. But we'll get into that as the story progresses. We need to start from the beginning. It all began when Sarah Oliver learned how to knit from her mom and great aunt. And before I go any further into this story, I should just say rewatching this pitch in this episode reminded me that we used to have those nice intro packages before each pitch that kind of talked about the business, gave you all this intro information so it wasn't intertwined with the pitch. And personally, I, for one, think we should bring it back. I think it's a better format. I thought it was a nice flow. Watching it, I was like, yes, this is the blueprint. Let's go back to it. That's my opinion. Anyway, this story is brought to you by that nice little intro package before her pitch. So that I'm just letting you know. As you can probably imagine, her learning to knit then ended up going into her hand knitting bags, which led into her giving them away to family and friends, and people liked them so much that she realized she might have a little business on her hands, and she started selling them. But as is the story, demand started to grow, and she realized she would probably need some more people to help make the product to make the business be able to grow. Then the idea came to her. She thought about a retirement community that her and her kids had visited in the past and thought maybe some of the residents there might want the opportunity to earn a little extra money. So she brought the idea to them, and thus the Purlettes Plus One were born. That's what they call themselves, a little band of knitters. It's all women but one guy, so that's why the little plus one. And then Purlette has to do with a pearl stitch in knitting. Don't ask me anything beyond that. I am not a knitter. That is what I have for you on that one. This decision to add the Purlettes to the manufacturing process, that's coming from her pitch. We'll get to that later. I'm not just saying that. I'm not calling it doesn't matter. Anyway, with the decision to have the Purlettes start knitting these bags came a complete rebrand of Sarah Oliver Handbags. She realized it was her best angle to really lean into the fact that senior citizens were making these. She added videos to the website so you could get to know all the Purlettes. In each of the bags, you got a little card so you know who knit your bag. And once she really had this elderly senior citizen helping bag brand stabilized, her next big move was to go into the Shark Tank. We meet Sarah Oliver in Season 7, Episode 10 of Shark Tank, where she comes in seeking $250,000 for 20% of her company, which puts her valuation at $1.25 million. And while I do have a lot of complaints about this company that we will get to, one of the one things I want to complain about is the ask. And it really just, again, I'm just yearning for old Shark Tank. I miss when people would offer more than 5% of their company. I am so very tired of these 2%, 3%. It's okay. We're living in past Shark Tank right now. Current Shark Tank can't hurt me. Anyway, when they came into the tank, her lifetime sales were $1.9 million, and the year before she did her pitch, their sales were $360,000. The majority of their sales came from their online stores, but they were also in 90 boutique locations. And now we get into the price of the bags, and I will remind you the price when we're talking about it later, but just remember it. I just want you to remember it. It's a tool for later. The price breakdown we get is for her best-selling bag called the Resort Bag. Her cost to make is $47, and it retails for $225. In her cost to make is the $17 a bag she pays each Purlette when they knit a bag, and the rest goes to materials. You heard me right. She pays the Perlettes $17 a bag. It's just a flat rate. So while they're making that a bag, she's making $178 a bag after she takes out her manufacturing costs and all that. And like, you could even lower it a little, say for like costs of running the business, the website, and the stuff like that. But 17 and 178? Wild. We'll talk about it more. But we gotta finish the tank for now. According to her, the average Perlette can make about 3 bags a week. She then informs us that she's working with 2 different retirement communities and has 30 knitters total who can make about 4,000 bags a year, which translates to $900,000 of bags. And her big goal was to expand to 5 retirement communities to continue to grow the business. Is anybody seeing why I think this could have become a geriatric sweatshop? No, just me? I don't know. I'm just saying. Lori, being the kind of shark and just overall person she is almost immediately just like, we need to all come in together and offer $250,000 for 25%, meaning they would all pitch in $50,000 for 5% each. She wants to make a statement saying like they care about the elderly and all that, and it's all just very Lori, very on brand. But then Kevin immediately also hits us with a very on brand moment, giving us the classic line of, this isn't the charity tank. And I was so irked by this because no part of this business is charity, but they bring it up so much. Charity would be if we donated money to the retirement community so they could have a little knitting club, maybe sell their little bags on the side for extra profit, you know, because they didn't buy the materials were donated. That's charity. This is just like cheap labor. Very different in my personal opinion, but it keeps getting brought up like, this feels like a charity. Like, no, this is not. Well, on that note, Barbara then immediately goes out saying that she feels like this is halfway between a cottage business and a charity. I've already said my piece. Moving on, we also have Mark, who thinks it's great what she's doing, but ultimately it's just not a fit for him, so he is also not jumping in on Lori's group deal that she made up and threw out for everybody. One of my favorite moments after Lori throws out this group deal is, you know, a couple of them being upset, being like, yeah, I don't know, I'm not saying I want to do this for sure, like, don't put me in this. And she was like, I didn't say you had to, I was just offering. But like we all know, Lori wouldn't front $250,000 for 25% for this by herself. Like, this deal is only happening if other people get involved. This isn't like a Lori being like, I'll do it, but I'm generously opening it up. But of course, because she's Lori, that is the way she frames it, and I love that for her. Never change, Lori. Iconic. But hope is not lost, because Robert decides he will team up with Lori, and they together will offer the $250,000 for 25%. However, instead of just saying yes to this, Sarah Oliver decides to see where Kevin's head is at, because he never formally went out. You know, he said kind of what he had to say about the charity tank, but he never went out. So for a reason completely unknown to me, she's like, what do you think? And his response, again, Kevin is very on brand this entire episode, is that he won't get out of bed for less than 10%, and he will do the deal with them, but they have to up the offer to 30% for the $250,000. Sarah Oliver hears this and is like, actually, never mind. I've changed my mind. Let's go back. But it's too late, because Robert's like, no, I like that better. That's what we're gonna do. And Sarah Oliver ends up taking the deal with them, and the episode closes with Lori hoping that they get 1 million Perlettes on their team. Again, geriatric sweatshop. Just saying. However, you may have been able to predict this, but maybe not. It's not all sunshine and rainbows after her deal, because shortly after her appearance on the Shark Tank, the federal government made their own special appearance to Sarah Oliver Handbags. The big issue was that she was filing the Perlettes as independent contractors or 1099 workers, but the issue is the government has certain rules about who is a 1099 worker versus who is an employee. And after an investigation, it was ruled that the Perlettes should be classified as employees, and this just proved too much for Sarah Oliver. She said that this would completely ruin her business, she wouldn't be able to afford to run it this way, and the federal government forced her to close. The first thing I need you all to know is that it is taking every amount of restraint that I have in my body not to spend the next 20 minutes with y'all going through the exact parameters around what makes an employee and what makes a 1099 worker, and how Sarah Oliver was kind of trying to blur some of these lines in between. But I realized that the majority of people do not want to listen through that. That takes a special kind of person, and that person is me, and that is a small group. So I'm using a lot of restraint, and I just want that documented, and I want praise. Anyway, so the short version of the issue with the whole filing them as 1099 workers is ultimately she wanted to be able to pay them per piece, and you can do that with a 1099 worker. You can pay them per job, per project, and she wanted to have that payment structure. Therefore, she had to file them as 1099 workers. And then in my personal opinion, I feel like she didn't want to be responsible for withholding and paying taxes like you do when you have an employee. I think she just wanted to brush that off onto the Perlettes, because once you're a 1099 worker, that is your problem to have to deal with the taxes. And she did all of that ultimately to benefit herself and to make the most profit possible, in my opinion. So let's just start breaking a lot of this down by talking about her claim that she has no way to run this business model if she can't pay them as 1099 workers. If she pays them hourly, it will completely collapse her business. I feel like this will not surprise a lot of people, but really the reason her business would collapse is because she wouldn't be making as much profit. And I'm not talking about like, oh, like she's making a reasonable profit and like she should do less because like this is a charity business. No. They were making 79% profit margin. If you hadn't already done that math for yourself when I gave the numbers earlier, fair if you didn't, because I didn't until I was breaking more of this down. They were making 79% profit margin. I did some poking around because I was personally curious, and from lots of things I could find, it seemed like even with luxury handbags, because she does brand this as a luxury bag, which is also kind of weird based on the branding and the vibe, but whatever. It's like 30 to 50% margin. Like, that seemed to be the main answer I was getting when I was personally looking into it. 79 seems wild. For the majority of businesses, 79%, incredible. So that's why she couldn't pay them that amount. Let's break it down even further. So naturally, I took the first step that anybody would take when I was starting to like break down all this information, and I looked up what the minimum wage would have been in California in 2015 when they were filming this. I got this from the Department of Industrial Relations, so it's the government. I'm trusting that it's right, and it says back in 2015, the minimum wage would have been $9. My next step was done purely out of nosiness because it has nothing to do with like her margin and like selling them and all that. But I tried to figure out how much taxes would have been withheld from their income if they were getting paid hourly in 2015. I couldn't find anything, but I ended up just using Smart Assets website to calculate taxes as if it was today. So I put it in as $9 minimum hourly wage, because that's what it was in 2015. And then I estimated that they worked 20 hours. I have no idea how long they were working. That never really got brought up. I don't feel like it could be more than 20 hours. So we're being generous at 20 hours. So they would make $180. But after taxes, at least according to this website, it'd be closer to $164. So if you're nosy like I am and you are wondering how much the Perlettes would like actually make, there you go. Your curiosity is satisfied just like mine was. But we'll get back to the point now about the profit margins and all that. So I'm going to be honest with y'all. Some of this math, I'm just kind of freestyling here because the only information I have is that a Perlette can make average 3 bags a week. I don't know how many hours it takes them. I don't know how many hours they're generally working to create these 3 bags, so I'm just kind of freestyling here. But we're going to live in the world that I created earlier, which is she is having to pay them $9 an hour, and they're doing about 20 hours of work a week. We're being generous because I just do not think it's more than 20 hours. That just feels wild to me. So, at the end of the day, she's having to pay each perlet $180 per bag because, of course, she has to pay those taxes that they're not getting. It's $180. If you divide that by the 3 bags they can make a week, that would put the cost of the perlet's labor per bag at about $60. So, taking this new number of $60 per perlet's time per bag instead of the 17 and add it to the original $30 of materials cost, it now costs $90 to make a bag. So if she was wanting to keep the 79% profit margin, she would then have to sell the bag at $428.57 to be exact, which, yes, is getting close to doubling the price of the bag, which as a small business just isn't feasible. People aren't probably going to spend that much for a hand knit bag. But hear me out. Let me take you to a different world. A world where she pays the perlets more. We keep the $90 to make a bag. She keeps her price of $225, and she still makes a margin of 60%. Editing Morgan here, I made the realization that I never talked about like the total cost of the employee, including things like other taxes that an employer has to pay on an employee. Part of that is because when I did think about it, I realized it wasn't going to be a whole lot, because it's not like she's going to be doing like insurance or benefits or things like that. I'm purely picturing this as her just paying them the minimum wage. But if we want to go ahead and take into account that bit of taxes, I used 2 different websites to try to calculate about what it would be. One put it at about $9.69 and the other was around $9.80. So I just rounded it to a cool, if it had to be $10 was like really the total cost of an employee per hour. And here is all the numbers adjusted for that if you're curious. And that's why I think it's so silly that she fought so hard about the fact that having them as employees would absolutely crush her business. It'd be completely impossible. Nothing could happen. Because when you really break out the numbers, and like, I don't know, maybe those perlets are working 40 hours a week. I think that would be wild if they are. But maybe they are. And so maybe the cost is more. But, you know, I'm just working with what I can work with here, okay? And if my numbers are even close to right, at the end of the day, it's not the federal government who took this business away from her. It was herself and her pride and her greed. My next big point I want to talk about with this whole situation is the taxes side of everything. This has been the side that has always made me super curious because, as I was talking about earlier, when you employ somebody, you take on the responsibility of withholding and paying taxes for them. That becomes your responsibility. When you're a 1099 worker, you take on those responsibilities as if you're a business. You get that paycheck from someone and you're expected to withhold a certain amount in like a savings account, a different checking account, however you want to do it, in a mattress. And at certain times when you have to file your taxes, you're expected to pay that amount. And I don't know if she was helping them like withhold that money, if she had some sort of program set up for them. I personally highly doubt it. I think she just filed them as 1099 workers, washed her hands of it, hoped for the best. But I could totally be wrong here. That part has always made me curious though, because if she wasn't helping them with that, if she didn't like clearly explain all that to them and make sure they were good, that's just not cool. Because at the end of the day, one of those elderly people could end up having the IRS coming to them like, hey, you owe me money. And granted, it probably wouldn't be a lot based on the fact she's barely paying them anything. But like, we don't know these people's financial situations at the end of the day. So it could be a lot to somebody. And right now it's only these certain 30 knitters. So you can say, oh, they're all fine. But if she's wanting to expand this into like a business with hundreds of 1099 workers, those are considerations you have to make about different people's situations. So, bottom line, if she wasn't taking care of that, uncool. If she was taking care of it, it is another point, though, of them being employees and not 1099 workers. So, double-edged sword there with the whole legality of all that. But still. And even if you don't care about the elderly people and you're like, they want to work for $17 a bag, let them be underpaid. Who cares? They want to do it. I hear you. It's whatever. You're definitely allowed to have that opinion if you want. What I will say is, aside from just like feeling like they should be paid a minimum wage for hard work they're doing, it also becomes an issue in the market of handmade bags, because when you're able to have your nice little luxury business based off the fact that you have crazy discounted labor, and then there's all these other businesses out here that are just trying to do the right thing, pay themselves a minimum wage that makes sense, especially in the handmade space. I feel like this is very big. It just undercuts the whole market. People end up having to lower their own profit margins to compete with you, and you have this weird advantage, and you might be like, that's capitalism, baby. And it is. And it's lame. That's what I'll say. It's uncool, in my opinion. And if you are still in the camp of let her pay these people $17 if that's what they want, you will be happy to know that while she did go down, it wasn't without a fight. She was posting all over social media, trying to rally people together to call on the government to change these laws. She was filing motions. She was doing everything she can, and it caused so much attention that a high school in California ended up doing their own little documentary about her. And I'm not going to rag on it because it was made by actual children, but what I will say is, while it's a documentary on Sarah Oliver, you can tell that it was very highly influenced by Sarah Oliver's point of view on the whole thing as well. One of my favorite lines in the whole documentary is in the beginning, where they say her business was crushed by the Fair Standards Labor Act, which is just such a funny sentence in and of itself. I think about it, I don't know, quarterly probably. Aside from that, the whole thing is honestly kind of sad, because a major point they're making, and a major point Sarah Oliver was saying she was trying to make, is that there are a lot of elderly people in these retirement communities who feel lonely, who don't feel like they have a sense of purpose, and giving them something like this to do can give them a sense of purpose. I, however, am just saying we don't have to exploit them for cheap labor to give them a sense of purpose. There are other things I think we could do if we all work together and brainstorm some ideas. I'm just saying. So while I do agree on all their points on that the elderly should be treated better, they should be respected more, all of those things, I just argue there are better ways to do it. And that little documentary is pretty much our last major update on the business. They ended up closing in 2017, and they have some miscellaneous Facebook posts after they closed. A lot of them include videos of members of the Pearlettes having a lot of fun in their retirement community. It doesn't seem like the retirement community they're at is one of those, like, sit-around types. It seems like the ones where they're always getting up and going. So I would say if you are worried about the Pearlettes losing their sense of community, I would say you could rest a little easier. From the videos I've seen, it seems like a lot of them, at least up to 2020, were still living their best life. They were doing fun activities at that retirement home all together, so you can rest a little easier there. At the end of it all, I'm sure everybody is going to have their own opinion on this. You might even have multiple opinions on different parts of the information. My overall personal opinion is it wasn't the federal government that took this away from the Pearlettes. What ultimately destroyed something that could have been a really cool, unique, purposeful business was Sarah Oliver's own greed. And that is a wrap on the story of Sarah Oliver Handbags from Shark Tank Season 7, Episode 10. Truly a wild one. It's one that's very close to my heart because if you didn't know, this Shark Tank story accidentally blew me up on TikTok. My partner and I were watching old episodes of Shark Tank for fun, and we stumbled across this episode, we watched it, we hear this pitch, and immediately we're like, something's wrong here. The government's gonna get involved with this. The way she's paying them doesn't seem right. We look into it. Lo and behold, the government had gotten involved. I made a throwaway TikTok video. It got 2-point-something million views. Shark Tank Talk was born. I was posting on there different Shark Tank opinions, stories, all that. which ultimately led into this YouTube channel, The Max Reality. So this story has always had a special place in my heart. I've always wanted to do a more long form story on it because, like I said, I was just throwing that away to like my couple friends on TikTok. I didn't really think anybody would see it. I didn't even post the full story because I just like didn't have time. I was doing something very classic TikTok story, and I don't even use that platform really anymore. So RIP to that. But you know, new beginnings, new chapters, but old friends you always keep along the way, which is Sarah Oliver Handbags in this situation. If you made it this far in the video, I know I always say it, but I mean it extra this time. It truly means the world to me. This was so much fun for me to make. I had been looking forward to this one for a while now. If you liked the video, don't forget to like it down below. If you like reality TV content, talking about old Shark Tank businesses, talking about general reality TV, check out the channel and subscribe. It is a good time over here. As always, I want to hear your thoughts, feelings, opinions, comments, all that and more down below. And until then, I'll see y'all in the next one. Just your average day at Shark Tank, but it's not, because after this episode aired, the feds had similar questions I had, and she ended up getting investigated. This is gonna have to be a part 2, sorry.